And we are at item 12, health and safety, believe it or not. With an ounce of luck, we'll be rescued by one of the groups out there. So can I invite Merla and Becky, or just Merla? It's been moved by Walker and Ferry that we receive. So here at the request of the Audit and Risk Committee to speak to the highlights in your report. Okay?
Tēnā koutou katoa. Look, thank you. I won't walk through the report, but I just wanted to highlight as a result of the Audit and Risk Committee and get your, I guess, confidence in the work that we're doing around health and safety. First of all, we have really strengthened the leadership and structure in that area. We've been in full-on recruitment mode since December, and we've got almost a full team with additional resource supported by ELT around, in particular, contractor safety project. Secondly, I guess we have moved from, because we're such a complex and diverse and spread out organisation with many different businesses, we've shifted from fragmented initiatives to a clear program of work to lift our game. And I'm pretty confident that we have got a very planned approach to that. We're understanding where we're at, clear milestones, reporting and audit readiness. And thirdly, we have an ongoing continuous improvement model based on plan, do, check, act cycle. So I'm happy to take any questions, but I just wanted to highlight the memo that Phil has circulated. Thank you.
Well, any questions? Councillor Ferry, thank you.
Kia ora, thanks Merla. So my question is around the bits identified in the report around violence and aggression towards staff, and something I wanted to understand about that is whether, sorry, I'm just trying to find the paragraph, whether, here we go, oh, it's logged me out, great. Anyway, find out whether that's something that's being looked at in the group shared services work, because I think there's potentially some stuff to learn there across different organisations. We do have a situation where sometimes anybody with an AT logo in a community where there's a project underway gets abuse, and so I'm sure that's happening in other ways too. So how are we putting that into that group shared services conversation?
Yeah, through the chair, thank you for your question, Councillor Ferry. We're working closely. We have a good, very strong links with Auckland Transport, and of course they are facing some of the same challenges that we face in council. At the moment we're doing a deep dive into that, and we're reporting back to ELT early in April on that work, and we'll be sharing that with Auckland Transport. But we've also been engaging with them as part of that discovery piece.
And just as a follow-up to that, so in terms of the measures that are being looked at by the ELT that I mentioned in page 192 of the attachments for the meeting, are you able to tell us anything about what some of those measures might be? Have you been talking with the workers impacted, with their unions? How is that sort of going? Because I think as elected members, obviously, I've talked about this before, we have a role as community leaders to set a tone and not attack staff and things like that. So I think this is something that it's important that we are aware of, things that those workers might identify that we might be doing that could be inadvertently or behaviour that we need to look at as well.
Yeah, so we're bringing back a new reporting approach to ELT to get some feedback on next month, and the work that we've been doing on the violence and aggression we had peer reviewed by an external person last Friday. So this is very much a work in progress at the moment. So it's too early, that's we can come back to you.
Yeah, I'm really interested in this, so yeah. Okay,
yeah, I mean, and just to reassure you, if we think about a really good example, the Te Atatū situation, which was, you know, serious. The staff did everything right. And so, that's very reassuring that on the ground, faced with a situation, the staff did absolutely everything right.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And look, I know with your post in libraries as well, I feel pretty confident about our library staff, but I'm thinking particularly about some of our other frontline people who, people who are working in service centres or in pools and leisure or whatever, people who haven't necessarily in the past had a lot of this kind of stuff happening in front of them, and will need more support to get it right and de-escalate and keep themselves safe too. Thanks.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you. You can ease back. And I will risk putting the motion. All those in favour, say aye. Aye. To the contrary, carried. Thank you very much for your attendance, Miller. Now, we're moving to item 13, stadium investment. I welcome Max and your team who you introduced to the thing. We've had a few workshops in this. We're planning to spend 150 million in operating and maintaining stadia over the next 10 years. I'm glad we've developed some investment objectives there in point 30 of the report. Please refer to that, which reflects what the staff have heard from all of us. So I want to move this, and Councillor Baker will second this, and then we'll open it up for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon. And I'm joined by my colleague from the Strategic Programs Office, Dave Jacks. This item seeks your approval for an initial set of stadium network investment objectives, which will help guide further work. We do have a presentation that I was hoping would come up, but I can probably do without for the time being. We'll briefly introduce how we got here, but we'll take the paper as read. I want to begin just by acknowledging that the stadium network represents a very important asset to the Auckland region. Each stadium within the network has its own unique and rich history in hosting events, and they each represent significant investments by past generations and hold cultural and historical value for local communities and the broader region. And we have heard through this process from councillors and from others as we've gone about it that they perform not only an important role in hosting major events, but also important community functions that are valued by their communities and by councillors. Oh, wonderful! Just in time. Why are we doing this now? As the Mayor pointed out, alongside all those good things I mentioned about the stadium network, they also cost a lot of money, and that's evidenced by the fact that in a long-term plan, we're planning to spend almost $150 million on operating and maintaining just the three stadiums which are in the Tātaki network. So that's not including any funding for Eden Park. And at the moment, we do not have a strategic framework that guides that investment. So there's no direction from the governing body to Tātaki or to council about how you want us to prioritise the investment in the stadium network. So that money is based on basically maintaining at a bare minimum what we have already. Providing that strategic direction is considered a priority for a number of reasons. We have the governing body's direction as part of the CCO reform. You asked us to prioritise providing strategic direction to CCOs where there were gaps, and stadiums was one that was particularly pointed out in the advice that went to you before that decision. There are some upcoming decisions about stadiums in a very short moment, but also in subsequent, hopefully a short moment, and in the coming months. And sort of slightly more longer term, we forecast that there is likely to be some significant decisions required as part of the long-term plan, and there's a need to sort of start the work now to inform that process. So I acknowledge this is a first step. It's been an initial process to come to a direction ideally from the governing body to the council about how you want us to undertake that work and provide the beginnings of a framework. So it will develop over time, is the key point I'm trying to make there. Before we get to the objectives, very important point to emphasise is the need to place stadiums within the broader context in which they're operating. Stadiums are not standalone assets. They operate within an interdependent network of venues, a very large network of public and private venues, which include a whole range of facilities, sub-regional outdoor stadiums, which have been mentioned. There's the Manukau Sports Bowl and the Navigation Homes Stadium, Councillor Baker, and then of course outdoor public spaces. And in some cases, these venues host very large events in and of themselves. What holds or distinguishes the regional stadiums and the need to have a particular set of objectives for them is the scale and in particular the higher capital costs that come with regional stadiums, and the fact that we've dedicated them to serving a regional purpose. Alongside the fact that those venues are all interdependent as a network, they also operate within an ecosystem for sports and events, which includes a whole range of actors involved in generating the content that goes on in these events, and includes, for example, the event attraction funding discussion that the governing body is currently in at the moment. And essentially, in order to be sustainable long term, it's not rocket science, stadiums need to attract enough content and need to be utilised sufficiently in order to recover the cost, the very significant upfront capital costs of them. Stadiums need to adapt to changing preferences, and they have a whole range of challenges which we go through in the report. And these things are things which have been highlighted for many years, so I won't go too much into them now. But the operating context is really important, and what these objectives do is set these things out and make it clear to us that when we're planning going forward, we need to be making sure we're cognizant of all of these things. Our initial work was based. There's a typo in that slide, which I'm mortified by, but should say existing strategies and plans, and the political direction from the governing body in your workshops and a drop-in session that we held, and broader stakeholder engagement, which we had with over 23 organisations, and an initial review of good practice internationally and nationally. So that's sort of what's gone into this initial work. Quite a lot more to happen later. Just very quickly going through the structure of the objectives. The first part of it is to emphasise the public value outcomes that we're seeking from the stadium network. This does two things. It emphasises the why, but it also makes it clear that when we are putting public money into something, we need to make sure that we've got a very clear connection with the public benefits that we are seeking. And that is something that, is always the case, but it's something we have to be particularly vigilant on about stadiums, because they have broader commercial purposes as well. And we need to make sure our funding is tied to these purposes, which are tied to our broader strategies and plans as well. One thing that was particularly emphasised in our conversation with you was the community role that stadiums have in promoting community cohesion. So we've emphasised that in the objectives. In terms of the investment priorities, what actually the council will focus on when we make investment decisions, we've come up with 4, which have a number of sub-points, and they all interact together. Basically, the first point is around maximising the use of the infrastructure, making sure that they are fit for purpose and able to attract content. The second one is about the network as a whole, having a complementary set of stadiums, so we're not funding the creation of redundancy within the network that undermines the purpose, the other parts of the network, and their prioritisation of multi-purpose, adaptable hubs, and the importance of serving the whole region. They're all really important points about the network. we've also captured the point that several councillors made to us around the importance of the stadiums being integrated into precincts, particularly transport planning and contributing to the success of the urban environment, and equally the importance that they are financially sustainable and that the public investment is well managed. So those are the objectives which would underpin, what we would focus on in terms of any investment from the council. And we've also, alongside that, put together some investment and stewardship principles about how we would go about that. This is sort of the helping to define council's role within this ecosystem. I think they're all pretty self-explanatory. I won't go through them all. The first point I'll just emphasise is just to emphasise the importance of acting regionally and what's the best interest of Auckland. That the council's setting that direction, that our decisions and our funding decisions will be about the region as a whole for this, and ensuring sort of independent of whether we own a particular venue or not, we're looking for outcomes. I think that's probably enough. Happy to answer any questions, Your Worship.
Deputy Mayor's got a question. I'm just finishing reading this. Quite good what you've written here.
Thanks, Max. Thanks, Your Worship. Thank you for your work in the space. I think we're heading in the right direction. But my questions, and I've got a couple, are as follows. So at what point will there be a comprehensive assessment of the future of different sports in Auckland which can inform investment plans? For example, what's the likely impact of the growth of women's sport? What's the likelihood of New Zealand hosting Cricket World Cups? What are the growth sports? What are the sports likely to be in decline? Sometimes it feels like we are assuming the future will look like the present and we're planning to build for what we have now as opposed to the future decades. So some thoughts around that, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Excellent question, if I do say so. The first point I would make is that we acknowledge in that context the importance of venues being adaptable and flexible. We cannot predict, and we emphasise that point. We don't know what the future will look like. If we were sitting here 3 years ago, I don't think we would have predicted, for example, Auckland FC's success and its role in Mount Smart, and we don't know what things will look like in 3 years. So that's an important point to emphasise. We can only capture demand in a point of time. But this is, if it's approved, this sets us off on a program of work leading up to the long-term plan is our plan, which will include detailed demand and supply analysis. So that's one of the next steps is for us to. We have already undertaken, as I say, that the initial stakeholder engagement. Spoken with 23 organisations, the key users of the stadiums, and spoken to them about their needs. But the next phase would be a lot more detailed analysis about what is actually demanded of the network. Some of that initial analysis is in that current state assessment, which we put into the agenda item on the main stadium. Yeah.
Thanks for that, because I think that work is really important as part of this. And my next question is, can you assure me that the investment plan and proposal for individual assets will adhere to the 10 principles for capital investment as agreed by the REV Committee?
Thank you for the question. I think, yes, they apply to all of our capital investment now, and so we will apply them across the board, and I think it's captured and could be explicitly captured under invest smartly and responsibly.
Just got the mayor.
There's no exceptions to that. So that's right. Of course they will. Everything should be under that one there. I think on item 30 is very good about what you're trying to come up with, and it's pretty sensible, I have to say, in terms of a stock take of sports and activities. It is only a point in time thing. Who knows what we'll be doing in the future? Paddle, Councillor Walker has a question.
Sure, I've got some questions. Mindful that council has only received this agenda as a whole late Monday, and the public only received it Tuesday morning, which was incredibly late in the piece and actually a breach of our, I'm not sure what act somebody could tell me, probably Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act, I'm assuming. So my concern is that this set of investment objectives be treated as a work in progress, because there are a number of outstanding issues. And if I just outline some outstanding issues by way of a question, one of the most significant things to impact on the region in terms of our investment across the housing network is the massive flooding that occurred not so long ago. If we look at our stadiums, Eden Park has an aquifer underneath it, arguably is resilient, but nevertheless it's something that needs to be factored in. Western Springs is directly adjacent to a stream that is subject to existing flooding and will be subject to even more severe flooding in the future. Waikaraka Park, though it's not part of this network, is in a coastal inundation zone, currently subject to flooding through overland flow paths, and has a network of underground streams, one of which runs through the stadium. It's not called Captain Springs Road for nothing. And on the North Shore, the Event Finder Stadium, which is not classified as a part of the stadium network, which is somewhat anomalous, but is in the Wairau flooding zone, and will almost certainly have to locate probably to North Harbour Stadium. That would be a good fit. So if I just park the question around the consideration of flooding and related issues, because that's what is impacting on our investment approach. The other issues that I want to raise is the fundamental around government support by way of funding and investment that I think is not adequately reflected in this report, particularly as it goes to the upcoming consideration around Eden Park and a Key Street Stadium. The other issue goes to the entity or agency that runs the stadiums on our part, that consistently runs the stadiums at a significant loss, highly significant loss in terms of operational cost. That's the trading loss. And in terms of the capital expenditure, the amount of money we tip in terms of capital. So my related question is whether this investment analysis is going to consider a change, perhaps along the lines of the single operator stadium. That's still a concept that's on the books. It doesn't appear to be picked up here.
So
The other,
what are you exactly asking? Because this is about...
this is around, my question goes to outstanding issues which I've raised that aren't being picked up at this point in this set of investment objectives, and I'm seeking some surety that these things can be addressed as part of a work in progress, because we've got a general problem across the stadium network. These investment objectives are pretty narrow in terms of picking up on things. And I guess the other concern that I've got is there's a network of a whole lot of venues out there, some of which have got more capital invested in them, for example, than, say, Western Springs. And on that basis, they would be included. So it's rather a narrow view, and arguably it should be more complete, simply because we've got 3 stadiums under Tautaki Auckland Unlimited doesn't mean to say that we couldn't and shouldn't take a more complete approach. So I just I'd just like to get an answer to those issues I'm raising.
Apparently there's a question there. Answer it.
Well, I can ask again if you like, Mr. Mayor.
It's quite all right. I got the question. Through the chair, I can give the assurance that those matters will be dealt with through this work. This is this is an initial set of work that is a work in progress, as the councillor said. And I think that's the key answer to the question. Just specifically flooding and stormwater, addressing those challenges around asset management and the constraints and infrastructure constraints absolutely is considered by us to be part of improving asset management and understanding, using good asset management principles. So we would consider that to be part of the next step. On the importance of acknowledging the national contribution that the stadium network makes, particularly the largest stadium makes, and therefore the case for government contribution, that's explicitly acknowledged in the objectives. It's not on the slides. I do apologise about that, but it is explicitly acknowledged and as a point we'll pick up on in the next phase, which is a conversation with government. And we are engaged with government on the development on their development of the national facilities strategy and how this would fit into that. Good governance is an important part of it. It's reflected in the objectives, and the work on SOSA we consider to be a component of the broader work that we're doing on stadiums and how do we ensure a complementary network of multi-use facilities. So we've picked up on that point. On the sort of broader network, what's included, what isn't. At the moment, what we've included here is what's known as the regional stadium network. It's the 3 stadiums that the council owns that have been designated as regional stadiums and Eden Park. We can consider what the process might be to reconsider those classifications, but at the moment that's the current state that we've worked from. But we certainly acknowledge, and it's the first point I made, the importance of the interdependent network of venues and seeing these as part of that network.
Fair enough, thank you for that. I think they're going to be aware of flooding and issues that go under good governance and sensible things. Anyhow, you're right. Actually, they're quite good places to have floods. No one's living on the damn place, so that's good. I've got Councillor Dalton, and then Councillor Henderson, and then Councillor Hills, and there's probably more to come, but that's where we are at the moment.
Thanks, Max, for this. And I really like the Auckland Inc. approach. It's something that Bill Cashmore and I were really wanting to achieve in the last term under the CCO committee, because it makes sense that public and private do work together when we're trying to match all of these events, whether it's sporting or concerts or whatever it is. My question for you is, the strategy or the framework that we have here is based on council's decision that it will be in the business of stadiums. Does a shift to that, if we decide, actually, we're pretty lousy at this, so we're going to get out of stadiums, can that be evidenced through analysis that the strategy provides, or would that be a direct decision of a governing body?
I think that would require a decision of the governing body. You mean in terms of ownership of stadiums or
Yes,
in terms of funding?
Ownership.
Yeah, I think that we don't intend to reconsider that question as part of the work we've got here, and so if you wanted us to, that would require, I think, a decision of the governing body.
Just sort of picking up on the Deputy Mayor's point about future, looking to the future and what that might look like, which is probably very different to today. Our priorities might be changing, and the whole thing around stadiums could very well not be our bread and butter.
Note that point. I think if that is a track the governing body wants to go on, it's probably something we would consider as part of the long-term plan decision making, and so this information would inform, this process would inform that type of decision making.
So just the follow-up question is that was it. Actually, it was to provide the best possible outcome in delivery of stadia and what they are there to do. Are we the best people to be doing that? And so that would become apparent as we went through this framework on particular stadia.
Yes, it could.
Did you get an answer for that one? I did. Okay, thank you. I wasn't quite sure. Councillor Henderson, please.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting one because we're hoping to put the main stadium debate to bed today. So looking at kind of the next tier of the publicly owned stadiums that we have, I suppose. So zooming out, just wondering, you know, many stadium strategies we've had over the previous terms have all fallen over for various reasons. But I honestly think this council has the sort of capacity to get something like that done. So will this piece of work result in a strategy on where to invest? And will that be with the goal of making our stadiums work together rather than competing with each other?
Through the chair, thanks, councillor. We've quite deliberately not called this stadium strategy. It's at this stage. It's, you know, it's a set of objectives which will result in an investment plan around how we're going to invest in the stadium network. It is not an attempt to try and solve the purpose of every stadium all in one go, and I think that that effort is a very challenging one to try and do altogether. But it is an attempt to give some strategic direction around what we're trying to achieve with the stadium network that over time will result in a more efficient network. It is absolutely the case with these objectives that we're seeking to invest in a complementary network that isn't competing. We're not seeking to invest in a network of competing stadiums. The idea is that they'll all be working together in a sort of complementary way.
That sounds great. So stadium investment plan, that's the name we're going to go with. Fantastic. Look, I've just got one more, Chair. I just want to, there's been some questions around it, but I just kind of want to drill down to get the reasoning straight on why we chose these specific stadiums and arenas, because, you know, obviously there's ones that are privately owned or ones that are smaller in capacity. You could even zoom out to places like Auckland Domain, which takes on the very things that stadiums do. So why did we pick these ones? What was the reasoning there?
The first point is quite straightforward, I suppose, which is that this is the currently acknowledged regional stadium network. So as reflected in other documents, long-term plan, significance and engagement policy, I believe. So it is something that has got a current classification. They are all venues that have a seated, permanent seated capacity over 10,000, which is a benchmark you can use, and essentially they all do perform a regional role. We could draw the line elsewhere, but this is in our view, our advice would be this is a sensible place to draw the line for now, in terms of what we're trying to do here, because these are performing a distinct role in the network. As I say, they have high capital costs, and they are different from smaller venues that have got a sort of sub-regional focus, or some regional venues that are, more indoor arena style. So it's not scientific, but it is our advice about where we should go.
So the specific principles, right? Thank you so much. That's very, very exciting work. Thanks, Mayor.
Councillor Hill, please.
Thank you. I guess it's just, and I know it's hard to give a full answer, but we often get this whole criticism of our owned stadiums or tātaki. Oh, they're losing us money, they're not commercial. But could you please set it the record here? We require a lot of free and affordable and low-cost events at the stadiums that are publicly owned, much like Eden Park and others do as well. But as far as I know, there are no stadiums that make money. If we could make it all commercial and ban all the low-cost or free events, is that correct?
It's a fair point to say that stadiums generally all around the world, with some limited exceptions in places with very different contexts, rely on a degree of public funding. So that is the normal scenario. It's not unusual that we are funding it, and it is also true that that the council requires of the current stadium network that it performs some community functions which come at a cost. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, Mount Smart and North Harbour, at the very least, have a huge amount of community, school, public, sports that cost us to turn the lights on, staff it, security, all that kind of stuff, but actually most of the time we don't make money, or you can't even sell tickets for a lot of...
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. On the other thing around promoters, what have we been doing on this with promoters? So the big sports orgs and Frontier Touring, Live Nation, things like that, a lot of them tell me that really, no matter what we do, it's the promoter or the event holder that will choose where to go. That's the number one kind of thing. And often, if we're competing with Australia, it's because the Australian states are putting in tens of millions of dollars, and it goes to the bed tax, the bed levy, bed night levy, whatever we're calling it, argument. What are we calling it? A levy. A levy. Yeah, so I guess it's a question of when you're doing this work, how we quantify the differences when people want to make everything the same with Australia, etc. I guess comparing success, and investment, how do you quantify, maybe one day if we have a levy and we have $20 or $30 million a year to put into promoting and getting events here, then we might see different types of events that we could charge more. But how do we look to the future while also measuring the current?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. And I think that speaks to the complex nature of this. It's not just about the venues themselves. There's multiple factors at play, and what we've heard from stakeholders, especially promoters, there's multiple things like there's the fact that, especially in Australia, state government puts in money to attract talent. There's things, one of them mentioned that promoters have to pay the 20% withholding tax, which in other industries, for instance film, gets waived. They said that was potentially something, and there's other things about that are outside of our control, about freight costs, the weak dollar at the moment, things like that. But there are things that are within our control, such as working together, providing funds essentially to attract content. Yeah, so it's hard to compete with Australia at the moment because there's multiple factors that we're not necessarily doing, which could be addressed through this plan as well.
This is more about rules for investing in the actual buildings rather than the operating them.
And I know, but it's all connected. We talk about
I
the
agree.
business case of why we would invest, but often don't talk about the difference that we're requiring of a stadium, such as free events, or our expectations. We can be like an Australian state that are pumping in tens of millions of dollars into bringing events to their stadiums. So.
That's true. That's going to come out in the bed night levy debate. Councillor Ferry, please.
Kia ora, thank you. So my question is around the fact that these stadiums sit and arenas sit in communities. And so we do have this issue here about that we've identified about serving the whole region, and I think that's right, but I think it's really important that through this process we don't forget about not just the community impact but the community benefit and the neighbourhoods that they're in. So how do you see us balancing that as we move forward with these principles?
Thanks, Councillor. Well, I think it's a very key point, and it was conveyed to us in the workshop that we had, and so we made sure it was reflected in the objectives, the importance of the value of community cohesion and the importance of stadiums contributing to the sort of surrounding urban environment in which they exist. That's how we've tried to capture that. It means that as we go through this work, we will attempt to understand the role that each individual stadium within the network plays within its community, and have some discussions with the local community about their interaction with the stadium, the issues with it, the value they see in it, and so that will form part of the work that we do. If these are adopted, that will provide a clear steer to us that that's what you expect of us.
Great, thank you. And can I just confirm that the relevant local boards will be part of those conversations?
Yes.
Great. And my final question is, one of the things that that I get feedback on a lot is the perception that a lot of these venues are only used for the big stuff. And the reality is that in a lot of cases, you know, as we've talked about already, they're actually doing small stuff all the time. And so telling that story, I think, and making that visible and identifying the opportunities there will be really key to the success of this. One of the key pieces of feedback I get is, it's fine, I just wish it got used more. And so, I mean, we have that there in terms of maximising utilisation, but saying more full stadiums, that potentially can be interpreted as more seats on bums at the big stuff, as opposed to actually there's stuff happening there, you know, 3 or 4 days a week that the public doesn't necessarily notice. So how are we going to capture that nuance too? Thanks.
No, thanks, Councillor. The actual objectives do include, in addition to the more full stadiums, more frequent use. So it's both that we have them more full more of a time, and that we have them used more frequently for other events. So both are captured under that concept of utilisation, and your other points are noted, and certainly things we'll take into account.
Just to confirm, I think it'd be really useful in those discussions with the local boards about identifying some of those opportunities. So Eden Park, for example, have been hosting the school orienteering sprints, which doesn't draw a huge crowd, but the kids get to run through the changing room and onto the field, and they love it. And so there's little things like that local boards, I think, could really help to identify. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Filipina, please.
Kia ora, Chair, thank you. Tēnā kōrua. Max, the question I have for you is, in 2012 there was a meeting at Pukekohe with the governing body at the time, and it was around the stadium strategy. There were 5 councillors who were there, and currently around this table. What I'm asking you is for us to have a look at the investment objectives, is to really understand which stadia we are talking about. So which ones, from your perspective, are we talking about? It was named in the 2012 agenda, and the 3 that were named then was North Harbour, Mount Smart and Eden Park. So for us to have a context around the investment objectives is for us to have a look first at which stadia that we could be possibly looking at. So from the team's perspective, which stadia do you think we'll be looking at around the investment objectives? Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor. The 4 stadiums that comprise the current regional stadium network are, from our point of view, Eden Park, Mount Smart, Go Media Mount Smart Stadium, Western Springs Stadium, and North Harbour Stadium. So, and those have been designated as the regional stadiums. And we're picking this up through this work. We'll be able to have a look at whether we've got those designations right, and whether there are other ones that should be or shouldn't be in the network. But at the moment, those are the current 4.
Chair, supplementary question. So for us to have a look at the network, the stadia that you've named your name for, is to have geographical coverage as well. So does that mean that obviously the navigation home stadium in Pukekohe, that's not being left out? I know the deputation is with the local board, and so your answer to the question earlier to Councillor Ferry was, yes, they are critical in regards to this stadium strategy. So, I mean, is that an option around the geographical spread for this strategy, knowing that the local board have deputation?
Thank you, councillor. The geographical spread point we think is captured by that concept of serving the whole region. Is your question whether or not we can look at including Navigation Homes Stadium in the network, or whether we'll look at it?
I think the question was more around, hopefully we don't discount them, because you've got Bruce Pullman Park, you've got Manukau, the Greyhound track, you've got other parks that are part of the local board deputation, but I don't think we should shut them out. Because, you know, again, when we know what the land is owned by council for the Navigation Home Stadium, for example, but under the deputation. I mean, I know that Councillor Baker is the councillor for that area, but he'll have a lot more information. I just don't want to discount it as a stadium strategy.
No, thanks, councillor. I understand. We're definitely not discounting those, so that we're considering them as part of the broader network and factoring them into our consideration.
Councillor Darby, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Max. Just in terms of paragraph 50 of your report, you refer to Tātaki Auckland Unlimited participation or their views. Well, the subheading is what their views are, but it just goes on to say they were involved. Tātaki have done years of work in this area. I wondered, did you draw upon their views, or did you just involve their staff? I would not like to hear that, you know, all that work of past has been wasted. There's been considerable investment there, but that's my first question.
Thanks, councillor. We did draw upon their views and the work they've done, but we also did this work independently, and then sought their views on what we had done. And we think it was important that the council do it somewhat independently, because that was the direction that we got from the governing body, that you wanted the council to take up the role of providing strategic direction and looking at this not just from Tātaki's network perspective, but from the whole network, which does include Eden Park. So they've been very involved, and we've gained a lot of information from them, and they've provided a lot of useful feedback. But we have done this task independently.
So when you say independently, it's independently within council. That is independent of Tātaki.
Correct.
Not independent per se.
Independent of Tātaki.
Right. And just in terms of drawing upon stakeholders and their views, you went to some 25 parties. That's an attachment, I think, B. What I note there, and I ask this question because we know from evidence the growth in content is not sport. It's artistic performance. And that's where the greatest profit is as well. So I note there that only 4 of the 25 parties that you sought feedback from are non-sport organisations. There appear to me a lot more places you could go to find out about the future, which is artistic content as opposed to relying on sport content. The stakeholder feedback appears very weighted on sport content. Can you explain why we haven't sought artistic feedback as much as we could have?
Yes, thank you, Councillor, for the question. So those 4 that we've spoken to represent sort of roughly 95% of the coverage of the content that comes through in terms of concerts and festivals and things like that. So they have the large majority sort of the market. So they have a very good representation of especially promoters that use these large venues. So that's the main reason we went with those first. And with sport, they're a lot more sort of disparate. So there's they don't cover as much, but there's a lot more of them. So that's why in terms of the numbers, it looks sort of more heavily weighted towards sport. But those 4 promoters cover a very large part of the market and have a very good representation of what it means.
Yeah, that's the sports one, so I get that.
No, the concert promoters that we spoke to cover 95%.
The concert promoters.
Yeah, but I think just the other part of the answer to your question is we focus at the moment largely on the current users as a first point, and going forward we'll be expanding that to look at potential future users as well, and we will draw, I take your point that this, and we certainly are of the view that stadiums are primarily for, we're certainly of the view that we need to take into account both core uses of stadium networks. So, and we need to make sure we're drawing on enough information about cultural events too.
So just one final question. I don't necessarily disagree with this document, and I'm not going to be sitting on the sideline, haven't thrown rocks at it. But I'd like it to be a document that enables ambitious outcomes, bold outcomes. And my concern is that the stadium decision has been run by an old boys club in Auckland for a long time. And when you look at the content of artistic performance growing, that's an audience of young people, not old men. And I'm wanting to get a sense from you that this actually can create ambitious and bold outcomes, as opposed to the familiar, the ones we reminisce on, and harp on ad nauseum about what was.
Thank you, Councillor. I think this could enable bold outcomes, and certainly we've tried to pick up the point of trying to adapt to the future needs, and achieve the broader outcomes that we are seeking. I think, though, that what we're focused here on is the investment that we have to put into our network, and what you want us to prioritise through that. And we didn't get a sense in our discussions with the governing body that you wanted us to be spending too much time looking at more bold, aspirational possibilities for the stadium network beyond what we're already doing. That's not to say we can't do that, but it's probably something that would require political direction before we got too far down the track. Makes sense.
Good question. Councillor Fletcher, please.
Thank you for the information you've given us thus far. And if I ask a question that might sound a bit crude, please forgive me. It's not intended to, but the vast majority of Aucklanders would look and say that the three drivers for bringing together amalgamation that many didn't want, one was transport, the other was water and wastewater, and the third was stadia. Can you confirm that that's the case? If we go back to pre-2010?
It certainly was referred to as a driver in the Royal Commission's report.
It was. So there is a measure of frustration, I think, by myself and others, and I've just been reminded, Councillor Stewart just drew my attention to a debate that we had in 2012, where Sandra Coney and myself moved an amendment that the National Council of Women be part of a working party, because we were wanting to broaden the understanding of what the needs might be. But the question I want to pose to you is, Mayor Len Brown was unable to get this off the ground, even though it was a driver for amalgamation. Mayor Phil Goff was unable to get it off the ground, and that's been pretty clear. And now we've got a new mayor, we've got Wayne Brown. What likelihood have we got of getting a coherent strategy off the ground and not wasting more time? Because it does annoy me terribly that we have spent so much money, so much time sitting in this chamber, and we have achieved so little. So what do you believe is the likelihood, if you were a betting man, of progress?
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's an excellent question. I think there's a need for us to do some of this work the reality is we are already planning to invest $150 million in our stadium network over the next 10 years. And we know there are going to be issues coming down the pike about that we haven't addressed in the long-term plan. So there is a need for us to continue to invest.
It's quite a novel concept to align your plans to your funding. It's sort of new to this council, but we're working on it.
But so I think I'm forever an optimist, but I would say that what we're doing here is a bit different from what's done in the past, which is to set out as a council-led process with some objectives and then work on a plan, which we're not trying to rush, and we're not basing it on because we're trying to some particular plan around how we see it all fit together, but actually we're thinking, this is the network, what are we trying to achieve? We're getting the right strategy in place, rather than starting with a process of trying to figure out what each stadium will do and trying to reconfigure it all, because that has been fraught.
And would you say that's why we've failed previously?
Well, I haven't, I wasn't here for a lot of that discussion.
History is quite important, though.
But I'm aware of the history,
and I think that time.
I think we're embarking on this in good faith and with an attempt to try and resolve some of these challenges. I think this has a good chance of putting us on the right direction, and what we're not proposing is I don't think this is suggesting a very significant investment of time and resources. It will be a significant piece of work, but I think it's proportionate to the level of investment we are proposing in the stadium network.
I've got a question, and given that, and having heard what you said, that councils and public bodies are mostly the owners, there's also the class of billionaires who seem to own quite a lot of stadiums around the world as well. This is a hopelessly optimistic sector. Everybody wants to build it and they will come. I've heard everybody wants to have them bigger than what the market is, rather than smaller than what the market is, and whack the prices up and pirate your own seats. There's the other player, and there's international rules. I built something in Whangarei about 3 years ago and the women's rugby thing completely changed the rules of what we built. So you have to have an awareness of that. So and I like the idea we're going to get some principles. That's something that the other ones didn't have. If you've got some principles, you might get a little bit further, because I don't really want to be the third disaster in this field. How do our rules moderate over-enthusiasm? I mean, we've got one over the shore, it's bigger than it's been filled more than 1 or 2 times. People want more than the market is. I don't get it, personally. We had a good example with the Sale GP, and they built their stand for less than what they thought they could go, so they gouged the shit out of everyone who got in there, which was good for you. How do we prevent this going off and building big lemons?
Thank you, Mayor. I think acknowledge the point you've made, which is, and it does reflect some of the conversations we've had in our stakeholder discussion, is that it is an area where people are aspirational and see, and often expect to be able to expect greater demand than exists. Let's put it that way. These objectives, I think, respond to what you're saying quite well, in the sense of emphasising the importance of trying to maximise utilisation, getting the most of the infrastructure that we have, and both full stadiums and more frequently used stadiums, so that can be approached from from several different angles. But one of them is around driving more content into the stadiums that you actually have. So look, see how you can put together a strategy to actually use the assets that you have, because that will help make them more sustainable. And the importance of having a complementary network. So you're not creating redundant assets, you are trying to fit them together so that they all have enough demand and all have their role and they can be sustainable themselves. Because if they are essentially competing with each other, or you end up with stadiums that aren't sustainable and are using public funding to build assets that aren't being used properly. So I think these objectives respond to the points that you've made, and would help us invest wisely in ways that will maximise utilisation and value.
Thank you for that. I acknowledge one of the hopeless optimists in the back of the room there, and took a bit of interest in that. So they just don't really make money very often, and so I think that's because they're usually bigger than they need to be. And I just want that to be kind of thought of in somehow or other with the priorities. But the idea of priorities is a good idea. Rather than going into it with no priorities, you're not going to get a good result. That's what we've got now. So thank you for that. You can retire and we'll have a debate, I suppose.
Oh,
now,
just
unless
before they
there's any
go,
more questions.
how important is it that we look at this regionally? Because the question that I was posing to you before, I have an answer for myself, and that is that we were not focused as councillors, because we are all elected from wards, that it all became a little bit parochial at times. But what recommendation would you be giving to us, and you did mention it at the beginning, of really taking a regional perspective on this?
No, thanks, Councillor. I think it is, it's the first principle that what we were trying to emphasise is the importance of acting regionally here. These are regional assets, they should be serving the region. So acknowledge that point. I do think it's also important that we look at how the sub-regions are served by the network, and that's reflected in the principles as well, and in information we receive from the governing body. So we are looking at the spread across the region too.
Thank you. You can withdraw going to comments now, and I've got them in some order already. I've got Councillor Baker and Councillor Walker.
Yeah.
I'm sneezing.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. So yeah, look, I think this, I obviously support this, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to actually move on, and and I acknowledge the 2012 study, and I welcomed. I thought you were talking about 4 or 5 councillors were there, and I thought I was a typical meeting here, but it wasn't, and I welcomed you to Franklin that day and was sat there and listened to that conversation. But that conversation started by listing what stadiums we had. Then we worked our strategy around it, and I think this is a really good opportunity for us to actually start almost with that, knowing what we've got. But the starting point is we create a hierarchy of stadium or stadia across the region, and that is driven by need, and it is driven by what we need to have fit for purpose facilities, and not by emotion and not by history. It will play a part, obviously, but I think we have a great opportunity here to reset where we invest. It's not all time that council has to do everything for everybody, and to provide, we can actually work with others. And we do have some facilities in the city that are really well run and operated, but are privately operated. And so how can we work that into a network of stadia that is comes with a hierarchy, and so that all of our needs are catered for across that in terms of where we put public money, because we need to always be mindful of that. And so, we need to be looking at the regional, sub-regional, local, and how those are invested in, how they are ranked, how they are rated, and how they fit the need of our communities now and looking forward to the future. And I think one of the things, and I look over at David Long, him and I probably spent a long time, an old sports journalist, we've spent a long time with what I did sort of across the times as managing teams and doing my ground announcing stuff, spent a long, long time in the bowels of stadia across the country. And if there's one comment I'll make is that we need to, whatever we do, we need to stand firm against some of our larger sporting codes who will demand and say, we need this. They have a degree of entitlement which I think holds us back from being able to provide decent stadia. They will say we need these facilities and we need that and we won't come. Well, let them find somewhere else. But we need to hold firm that this is what we as ratepayers and council are funding and why. So I think this is a really good starting point. Thanks to the team for the work, and I look forward to continuing on as we build a better look at what exists across the region, whether it be the mighty Navigation Home Stadium in the south or something out west, something out north, whatever that might look at. But it's a good starting point, and so obviously supporting it.
A word from the counties now for Councillor Walker from the north.
I'm supportive of this approach. It's one of three things we need to tick off as far as stadiums and venues are concerned. One is determining where investment goes, irrespective whether it is a council venue or stadium or whether it is somewhere else, and that could be Eden Park or somewhere else. Secondly, we also need to address where content goes, which we have currently not addressed. And then thirdly, we need to address where event funding goes, because we actually often provide a subsidy for where events go. Fundamentally, what this process does is it takes back control from Auckland Unlimited, or Tautaki, who so far have been, in my opinion, incompetent in terms of running any form of stadium strategy, even though that is their mandate. So cast your mind back just a little bit to where they were proposing to sell North Harbour Stadium as used infrequently. And that was because they'd run it down deliberately. Witness the present debacle over Western Springs Stadium, and I won't go to that process, but it is an absolute debacle. Witness the process around the Stadium Working Party strategy, which has been highly suspect in my view, and I certainly presented some information around that. So this takes things back rightfully to where it should be, and that's with us. The further step to that, frankly, is taking the stadiums out of Auckland Unlimited so that they're run more efficiently, more economically, and more effectively for the citizens of Auckland, because many of these stadiums, as Councillor Ferry and others have mentioned, have got a high degree of community use, playing fields and the like. At North Harbour, they were going to sell all the playing fields. And it was only when another part of Council Parks pointed out to them, if you sell the playing fields, we're actually going to have to buy fields north of the bridge because we're short of them, that they took a pull. So this is a very important and useful process. One of the fundamentals is that it is not adequately transparent, so we as councillors or Aucklanders still don't know what the real costs are around the losses that our stadiums run at, and are also not aware of the massive quantities of capital that we tip in on a yearly basis. Those stadiums don't have any loan account, they don't have to pay any interest, so it's just a hole that we keep pouring money into, and this investment process will hopefully give us more financial rigour over our approach. So I am supportive of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor. Kind of hard act to follow that one because I was actually going to say, look, this is an area of life where emotions run super high. And we need to actually reaffirm that as leaders, we need to take an approach based on evidence, based on rational planning. It should actually be kind of as boring as we can make it out to be, rather than fiery speeches about this and that, in my view. Look, and just on that note, I do need to address this. I don't think anyone should be called incompetent in this space. Honestly, when I'm in the South Stand enjoying the Warriors, full house, beautiful stadium, fantastic passion. I'm not even a Warriors fan, but I bloody love it. Laser shows, all kinds of things. The production is fantastic. And I'm not sitting there thinking anyone's done a bad job. They've done a bloody great job for the city, actually. We should say that more often, and we should affirm it in the public so that the public have confidence in our decision-making and the decision-making of the council group and in the decision-making of us as leaders at this table. So when you're saying these kind of things, it reflects poorly on us as well. Look, and just the final thing I noticed, we're actually standing on the wreckage of previous failed strategies. And that's a real shame. It's a real shame. I think that people that were involved in those maybe need to reflect on their role within that failure, and maybe we can do a lot better next time. The likelihood of success here, and I want to end on a positive note, is that the stadium investment strategy, written and passed, I think it's very high. Actually, I'm feeling super optimistic because this term we've tackled a hell of a lot of challenges, hard challenges. We've got another one coming in the very next item, and hopefully we're going to pass that one too. So we've certainly got some runs on the board in these tough decisions in this term, and I reckon that we can get this one across the line. So look, in terms of it being done, I'm absolutely not a betting man, but if I was a betting man, I'd be going all in. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, let's hope we do better than we did with MOTAT. Councillor Watts.
Runs on the board. Okay. Well, I think, to be honest, the innings has been progressing quite satisfactorily in spite of the stoppages in play all along the way. All the things that have been referred to here are happening anyway. Concerts, the growth of women's sport, new franchises, community usage, the change in single codes and things like cricket that go from T20 to 50 overs to test match. That's all happened. That's all happened of their own volition over the last couple of decades. So despite all the the proposed investment objectives, the public value outcomes and stewardship principles and investment priorities, it's already been happening, guys. Ask the Warriors, ask Auckland FC, packed out stadiums, ask Eden Park about their concerts. So in spite of everything that we've been doing, it's been rolling out in Auckland quite satisfactorily. If we're looking at the stadiums themselves, and I'll restrict myself to the council suite, Mount Smart opened in 1967. It's had track and field, World Series cricket, Commonwealth Games, new sporting franchises. Western Springs, 1929, built by relief labour during the Depression years, probably for a couple of £100. Cycling, athletics, football sports, Speedway since 1929, concerts of 80,000 people that can still be held in that natural amphitheatre now. I'm not looking at you, Richard, I'm looking through you. North Harbour, opened in 1997, league games, soccer franchises, NPC, concerts, now Moana Pacific. All those stadiums were left to us, okay, in some cases back nearly a century. Auckland Council, all its predecessors, haven't had to build a stadium for 30 years. They're sitting on the back of 100 years of legacy councils that have provided these facilities, have built them. All we're having to do is look after them and spruce them up a bit, and as the trends in sports change, accommodate it. It's not rocket science, it's not a huge challenge, it's a statement in the glaringly obvious, as indeed are all these principles here. There's nothing too difficult about them. And they're reflected in the population growth. So 1.7 million people in Auckland today. At the start of the super city, 1.3 million. In 1990, 870,000. Our population has doubled, yet we've still got just the same suite of main stadiums. So we certainly can't afford to lose one, as has been the drum that's been beaten by Tautaki and RFA for the last decade. We can't afford to lose one. Our population's doubled. We have more sporting codes now than ever. So just make the best use of the stadiums we've got. If they need doing up, we'll do them up. That investment there, 111 million over 10 years for capital works. That's an average of 11 million a year. That's not too excessive, is it? You're putting 11 million out to Waikaraka Park for a starter. $11 million a year to keep your suite of stadiums going. Eden Park, we've been bludging off Eden Park for 125 years, except for one time when they got a grant of 9.8 million when we thought the earth was going to fall in. We've had the main stadium for free, thanks to Auckland Cricket and Auckland Rugby, who built this grounds and developed it, and the government chipping in, admittedly, in 2011. So it's not the last of the insurmountable challenges to Auckland Council. It's pretty straightforward. Make the use of what we've got now. We're very fortunate to have inherited those stadiums, and we're very fortunate to have the sorts of codes that are thriving in their own way, and no doubt there'll be new ones we don't know of yet that will emerge in the future.
Well said.
Thank you. Very passionate. Councillor Lee.
I'll be brief. The uses to which these stadiums are put to, stadia are put to, sport and recreation events, are a serious part of Auckland's cultural life, so they're absolutely vital. It's interesting to hear at certain stages we have too many stadia, or then again, not enough, we need another one. While the use of stadia is essential, important, as I say, the debates about stadia, particularly the veteran debate between Eden Park and essentially a phantom waterfront or downtown stadium is not serious. It's almost a batty aspect of public life in Auckland, and it's a debate that doesn't go away and probably never will. But it shouldn't be taken too seriously, particularly when it comes to enormous expenditure of public money. And in the meantime, the debate itself is a distraction from the serious business, the serious problems that we are confronted with in modern Auckland. I speak as a decorated veteran of stadium debates, and my advice is, let's not take this stuff too seriously. As I say, the use of these stadia is highly valued, highly important for the people of Auckland. The ongoing debate may be interesting and engaging and newsworthy, but actually, in the end, it's a complete waste of time and money. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Fletcher.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. In my questions that I posed, they perhaps could have been somewhat frivolous, but I wanted to highlight the fact that if there's any failure, the failure is of this council to be able to progress something that I think the people of Auckland have expected from us since 2010. And for a whole range of reasons, not the least being political promises and the white elephants that they have been an impediment to actually calmly and sensibly looking at what we have, looking to optimise what we have, and with a degree looking to what we will sustainably be able to fund into the future. So I really welcome today. I welcome the fact that our CEO is sitting here and taking all this on board, and that he is going to ensure that there is a process of leadership here that is going to be done with professionalism, with integrity, and I think hopefully based on hard evidence. And I'm, for the first time, really feeling that we might get something across the line. But at the moment, I think our reputation is on the line, and that of local government, If we are unable to deal with this, it doesn't reflect well on any of us. So I'm pretty hopeful. I hope that the team who have presented to us today get on with it, and that it's a matter that comes back to this governing body, because we're all vitally interested in this, and that we all have the opportunity to contribute. But, you know, this is not before time. We need to get on.
Councillor Filipina.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to push back just a little bit around what I've heard. And my first and only pushback during this is around run it to the ground deliberately. That I know didn't happen. They did not run down North Harbour deliberately. And I'm talking about Tātaki Auckland Unlimited. So just my pushback on regards to that. I will go to Councillor Watson. Councillor Watson, your whakapapa to North Harbour. There's one thing that I didn't hear you say, and it only cost $41 million in 1997. 41. And we now have a stadium that hopefully, with the expression of interest, ends up getting run as it did prior to the amalgamation of all the councils. You know, I mean, because when I saw the value to that, I went, you know, that's a big amount way back in 97. But as you said, look at the use that has got and will continue to have for the rest of Tāmaki Makaurau. The strategy itself, and I read the strategy again when I downloaded it a while ago. I've read it again in regards to that strategy at Pukekohe in 2012. Max, I acknowledge you and the team's work for bringing it here. I hope there's a timeline, because there was a timeline in the 2012 first stadia strategy that didn't go anywhere, and we're still waiting. You've now put something on the table for us. I hope that there's a timeline, and I hope it's not 2027, I think, is the next LTP, 2737. I hope it's not that long for us to end up doing something. In regards to the Warriors, that was mentioned in the 2012 strategy, the Warriors in coming through, and look what the impact that has had. I mean, you know, the best thing is, Councillor Henderson, I know you don't like the Warriors. I'm going to give you my 4 season tickets. So and I want you to take your family and sit in the seats that I have, which is right on the 50-metre line on the Eastern Block, and you just enjoy the game with yeah. So I'll give you those tickets, and then you can take your family and just look at the environment. But look, it's welcome. I definitely welcome, and I mean, I know that was Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Lee, Councillor Walker, and myself, and then Councillor Stewart, who were there in 2012. So we must be pleased that at least we've got something now to move forward on. So I will be supporting this. Kilda.
Thank you, Councillor. We're just checking to see what sort of a timeline we can put on this to make sure it doesn't drift on forever. I'll drag.
Max back.
I'll just ask the CEO to sort of come up with a guidance, but I want to put a date on this to get something up and down. I don't want this to become another unfunded strategy.
That's why I asked him to be a betting man about whether it would get off the ground.
If you're doing the next LTP, can I ask a question?
Hang on, we'll just let Max answer. We've asked him to come up with some idea of a timeline. I don't want this to drag on for another too long. I mean, you've got a support for this, so make hay while the sun shines, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. The timeline that we're proposing is in the resolution, which is that we this work, the longer term work, we're imagining is done in order to inform the long term plan. Now that means that we'll be bringing you work next year, because this is a process. You know, if it's to input into the long term plan, we need to be doing the work next year. So that's we will also, but there'll be updates before then, and as we signal in the paper, that there's a set of decisions which will be brought to you about the stadium network this year, which we will use the objectives to help inform the advice we provide you. But that's a time frame that we're planning so that we can do this right and we can make sure that we are informing your decisions in the long-term plan. We're informing that with quite detailed and in-depth information about the state of this stadium network and the possibilities.
Well, how about we get a progress from you where you got up to at the end of August, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, right. And we'll have a korero again and give another bit of an input for everybody. Good debate, thank you very much. I'm going to propose this now. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
The contrary, carried. Thank you very much. Good bit of work. We're going to stop, comfort stop for five minutes because the next one's likely to be quite a while. So see you all in 5.